The aim of this resource is twofold. Firstly, we want to be aware of the importance of health and our responsibility to look after our health. Secondly, employers have a responsibility to protect their workers' health by identifying, managing, controlling risk. Line managers can have a big impact on this area. They know their staff, they know the work activities their staff have to carry out. It's a case of stopping and thinking about what we do, how we do things, and what it is that we can do to improve their situation so that they're not exposed to so much fume, to dusts. They're not lifting or pushing heavy loads if they don't need to. The Health and Wellbeing resource is an awareness tool. It isn't the end point. We're on a long journey here, and this is just the start. There's going to be other resources that will build on this in the future. So this is to get people started on identifying those health risks and making sure that you feel confident that you can do something about it. A health risk assessment is all about stopping and thinking about what your staff are exposed to, identifying those dusts, those fumes, those chemicals, what it is that makes their job hard. It's identifying what you can do to improve the situation. By that, you're managing and controlling the risks. And it's your responsibility as a line manager to try and make those assessments so that their health is not affected. The advice I would give to line managers is to be aware of those things that can have an impact on your staff's health. Try and identify what you can do to manage those risks and start making those small steps. A lot of it is common sense, but it's important to start making those small incremental steps because in the long term you'll actually make quite significant improvement.
People were the welders, the guys out on the track doing the welding, where you've got a problem with the rail, where you need to maybe cut it out and re-weld it or rejoin the rail. So they were the individuals concerned that would have concerns about the welders. Well, they can be very serious, and I think this is what some of the studies were showing. People who had had long-term exposure to welding fumes were suffering respiratory illnesses, lung illnesses. So we needed to look into what were the main risks associated with this for our employees. We decided we need to commission some work to actually do some monitoring, occupational health monitoring, to understand what hazards there were associated with the welding activities. I decided to use the National Track Material Recycling Centre here in Whitemoor, because it's an area where they undertake all the tasks. They do the different types of welding, grinding, different types of hot cutting. They have used rail here, new rail here, manganese coated rail here. Basically, it's a one-stop shop for everything that we needed. We did 49 tests over 2 days. The guys wore monitors on the lapels, which is as close as we can get to the actual mouth, the nose, so we can actually see what there was breathing in. We did it inside the facility. The idea of doing all the work inside as well. So whatever we did outside, we did inside. I utilised the experience and knowledge of the welders down here, and Richard Oliver, who's the S&C quality manager. They've got years of experience doing this on trackside, so utilised their experience and knowledge. They told me what happened, so we monitored what happens, not what maybe I perceived to happen. So we did the burning outside, and then we did the burning inside, so we used oxypropane, oxyacetylene, to try and work out what the hazards associated both were. We're looking more on a risk-based approach to PPE, in effect. We need to identify what the hazards are. We need to do a proper assessment, although I think sometimes we need to move away from assessments because it scares people, but assessments are quite simple things to do. We do them every day when we cross the road. We do them every day when we jump in this car. It's not a dark art to do an assessment. It's generally an opinion that you're going to have and what the consequences are, what the likelihood of them consequences are. Is it working? I would say at the moment we've got some way to go, but not a long way to go. We have a starting point now where we have some figures, and I think the figures are very positive. Certain people have already had the report sent to them so they can start looking through it and reviewing it, so they can see that the hazards out there associated with welding are maybe not quite as serious as we first imagined they were.
I lead 5 teams of 30 people out of about 250 who work for ORR as a whole. Some of my people travel to Europe to be involved in negotiations with our European colleagues. Others are involved in inspecting the railway directly, looking at human factors issues or railway operations, and others are office-based. Work-related stress, why should we bother about it? Why am I bothered about it? The reason is that I do not want to lose any of my staff to long-term sick. That would have negative effects on the productivity of my teams for a start, but as well as the ill health that they would suffer, which is not something I want on my conscience, to be honest. We based our approach on the HSE stress management standards, which are available on their website. These standards set out practical benchmarks for areas of managing your people that you need to get right in order to avoid positive work pressure tipping over into stress-related ill health. The 6 areas that they cover are the demands on people from their workload, control, the degree of control they have over that workload, the support that they have from their colleagues, the relationships with their colleagues, the role that they perform, do they understand it, and change management. And all these 6 areas together, if we get them right, give us a good practical way of controlling work-related stress. From my point of view, what I want to see from my managers is that they're paying attention to managing each of the 6 areas in the management standards day in, day out. I don't particularly want to see particular action points being delivered, because this is so much about day-to-day management of people and being aware of the things that you have to get right in order to achieve good management of the stress and work pressures that people are under. So I then take any feedback that I hear from staff and we feed that into another discussion, perhaps at a later managers meeting. So is it working? Is it worthwhile? Should we bother? I think in these particularly tough times that we've got, people are under financial pressures, pressures at home, pressures at work. Every business is having generally to make cutbacks. Do these standards actually help? I believe that they do. And the reason I believe they do is because they help us to actually discuss those areas. We don't hide them. We actually bring them out, talk about them, and we might not be able to solve them all completely, but we have and are able to identify the things that we can do to make things better. And that's what it's about, trying to get improvement.
We've got about 950 drivers. Obviously there are those who there's no effect whatsoever. In fact, probably the majority. But a number do experience some difficulties. We've got various different fleets of rolling stock. Some have different difficulties with different fleets. Some find seats uncomfortable. Sometimes the depression of the foot pedal is uncomfortable. Sometimes the reach to various controls is uncomfortable. And of course there's a big difference between feeling uncomfortable and any potentially more serious issues like, back strains or any other sort of musculoskeletal problems. People have varying different degrees of discomfort or not with driving cabs. They're obviously a very difficult thing to change because they're within the fabric of the makeup of the vehicle itself, and there are certain controls and equipment that you need to fit into a cab. So we're working with quite a limited scope for change, really. if a number of your drivers or any other members of staff come and say they have some issues, I think the important thing is to step back, understand what their issues are. What we did on Southern was to employ an ergonomics specialist. We're not expert in this field. It's quite a complex field, much more complex probably than I thought when we started. But the ergonomics specialist is able to take all sorts of measurements of cabs, view people at work using video, mock up various scenarios and have people test them out. And of course, our 950 drivers are of all different shapes and sizes, and that presents some difficulty in itself. I think if we're honest, will we ever have something that completely satisfies everyone? Maybe not. Our important, end result is to have something that is suitable for the highest number of people we can. One of the interesting things that came out of that survey was that actually over 98% of our drivers had never had any briefing, training or suggestions as to how best to sit, their posture. So we spent a considerable time putting together a DVD with our ergonomics specialist around posture and how best to adjust the seat on various fleet and how best to sit in that seat. And also some exercises to do. If you travel on aircraft, especially long haul, quite often you'll be asked to do some exercises to keep your blood circulation going and just generally keep yourself in shape. And it's no different on a train, but to be fair, we hadn't really told our train crew that. So we put together a DVD with all that on, issued it to every member of every driver with a letter. And the really important thing I should say is all the way through this, we were involving the union. So it was a real joint approach, and indeed the letter that went with the DVD was jointly issued from the company and the union representatives to ensure that everybody had complete buy-in to it. The DVD has sections for each of the types of fleet that we operate. So you can quickly navigate your way around and only look at the parts that are relevant to yourself. Is it working? It's a bit early to say. What I would say is that the whole project thus far has driven a completely different specification for the latest train that we're ordering. I think it's important to recognise there's only so much that a company can do, and like anybody, whether you're a driver or any other role you perform, there's certainly an element of your own personal responsibility to ensure your general level of fitness and your suitability for the environment you're going to be working in. Ultimately, we all want the same thing. We all want a safe railway that people are happy in the environment they're operating in. So it's a big issue, but take it steadily and take specialist advice would be my suggestion.
I think line managers should be mindful that when they're talking to employees about health issues, that it is from a colleague to colleague perspective and not as a friend to friend, as this can often set the wrong footing. I think it's important to remain professional, and then you gain the trust and confidence that will then allow the employee to engage and communicate openly with you about the health issue.
A line manager should think when approaching an employee about a health or wellbeing issue is the first thing to not be afraid to address the issue. It's about opening up dialogue, it's about sensitivity when you're talking to your employee, it's about having the conversation in the appropriate place, so a time when it's private, that the employee's got time to speak and feel secure that they can disclose issues that are going on in their life.
A line manager should be aware that there are support and services out there other than occupational health. If the health condition is more serious than first anticipated, we have employee assistant programmes in place, and also we have the ability to refer to a third party specialist for private referral if that is deemed necessary.
In essence, the line manager has an essential role in helping the employee within the workplace. They are the interface between the employee, the occupational health department, the human resource employment law, and it's about making sure that channels of communication are kept open.
There may be situations where the individual doesn't like the recommendations that are made by the occupational health department. However, it is important at the very outset, at the management consultation, that the process is outlined to the employee so they understand what is expected of them and what they need to expect from the occupational health department with regards to guidance in the management of their condition and getting them to return to work.
This all falls back into the importance of communication. This falls back into the importance of ascertaining before the employee is sent for the advice, and also early discussions about return to work and looking at any anxieties that the individual may have on return to work, so that you can put in a plan to help smoothly transition the individual back to work.
So in conclusion, when it comes to using the 5 steps within the organisation, how much effort each step takes will depend upon the difficulty of managing the issue identified. It may be that for simple issues, the 5 steps can be carried out by a few people without much effort. But for more complex issues, it may be it will take a number of colleagues to work together to resolve the issue. Either way, the line manager's role is vital to start the process off.